good Monday afternoon to you, wherever you may be. Vasu, Vaddiparty, Casey, Freelove with you on May 24th, 2021. This is the Make the Money and Run podcast for Monday. How you doing, Casey?
I am doing well. What a weekend in sports. I would say this might be the first weekend that felt a little bit like 2019, and I mean that in a good way. Seeing butts in the stands, people running after Phil Mickelson as if he was the Pope reincarnated here in the United States, and a lot of great baseball as well. It was one of those weekends where you're like, I'm in my sweet spot here. That's how I felt.
2019 reminds me 2 years ago, the last time I had an adult beverage on my birthday, because last year was not fun. So,
Yeah, it was the birthday weekend.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit. But it's a family-rated show. We'll get to that in a little bit. But you can catch us here every Monday, Thursdays, and Fridays, 4:15 Eastern, 1:15 Pacific. Thank you on Facebook. Thank you on YouTube for the live showings. And then download and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast if you miss any of it. We'll have picks to talk about at the end of the show. We'll talk about the NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball, a good weekend for me as well, too, as a Dodgers fan, and the New York Yankees sweeping the White Sox in New York. Kind of a little bit of a shock there. And then, of course, NHL playoffs are starting to wrap up here a little bit. On to the next round. 2 teams already into the second round. But we start, Casey Freelove, we start with the Champions Tour. Well, not the Champions Tour, the PGA Championship. As soon as I can find it here. PGA Championship. How about Phil Mickelson, 50 years old, the oldest player to win a major champion at the PGA Championship in South Carolina. Wins by a 6-shot win, two strokes better than Brooks Koepka and Louis Oosthuizen, and it ends up being way interesting at the end as Mickelson shoots 1 over 73 in the 4th round. But let's take it into consideration as far as Phil Mickelson and what it means for golf. And I got another question for you after that. But tell me your impression of watching a little golf this weekend with Phil Mickelson.
Well, I think the one problem that golf has, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm a guy that watches golf that often. I do enjoy the majors and anytime Tiger is in competition. But if you ask a casual sports fan to name a couple of the young gun golfers, maybe they'll pull out a Jordan Spieth or a Brooks Koepka or Rory, but they just don't kind of have those faces that draw you in my opinion. Now, I know golf fans are golf fans, and that's a little bit different. But when you sprinkle in Lefty, I mean, it's a flashback for you, for me, for anybody that enjoyed the game of golf, because he, of course, famously was always kind of number 2 as far as popularity and ability behind Tiger Woods. But some people really liked him a lot better. And he also doesn't have questionable things in his life happen as Tiger did. So Phil could be one of the most popular golfers out there. And it just speaks to the longevity. And I feel like I don't go too deep with me, but the way that the humankind is just getting better as far as our genetics and our ability to do things as we get older. I mean, this is the year of the old man, 43-year-old Brady hoisting the Lombardi. And now Phil Mickelson sitting here at 50, winning the PGA. It was just nothing short of remarkable. And the cool thing was, Vasu, he didn't just kind of let you cruise through it. I mean, we got nervous with him yesterday as he was going back to the Phil of old, where it's like, oh, is that the shot you really want to put out there, sir? And it worked out for him in the end. And it was just, it was really a magical afternoon. I'm really glad I actually tuned in because, I'm not the kind of guy that typically would be watching golf. And I don't think you and I really talk about golf very often off the air either.
Yeah, you're right, Casey. In terms of, sorry about that. In terms of Phil Mickelson, he just ended up with Brooks Koepka, ended up being, the favorite going in, the younger guy. And I was listening to a couple of golf writers today on local radio, national radio, because it is a big story, and that's why we're starting off with it, is that the Phil Mickelson of old was Tiger Woods before Tiger Woods came in. He was very popular. The other golfers didn't like him. He was kind of cocky. He and Ernie Els were going to take over. He came out of Arizona State, 1992, and then a few years later, Tiger Woods came in and kind of overtook that. And I also had read that Phil Mickelson was not very liked because of the way he played in his early days in terms of the cockiness that we just talked about. So he and Ernie Els, David Duvall, and those guys, and then Tiger Woods came in, and Phil Phil is now revered as the nice guy, the older guy, and here he is signing autographs for fans. On the Sunday of a major championship, he's signing autographs and giving golf balls to kids. It's unbelievable what he did. But let me ask you this, Casey, in terms of Phil Mickelson, you mentioned Tom Brady, Roger Federer, Serena Williams. They're all in their late 30s, early 40s. Are we in a generational tendency now where the training and the food and the diet and the way athletics is now, that this is kind of going to be more the norm as we go forward? Because we look at baseball players going longer. Brady, you said, and then Federer and Serena Williams, they lost last week, but they're both 39 years old. And then you've got, like I said, you've got outfielders in their 40s. You've got pitchers in their 40s. Bartolo Colon ended up hitting a home run at age 44 a few years ago. So what do you think about this generation? I mean, they're younger than us. I mean, let's face it, we're not talking about us. We're talking about like the athletic ability and how they approach it nowadays, as opposed to days of old when 35 and 36 is old for athletes, baseball, football, basketball, otherwise.
I think outside of football, that's accurate. I still don't think we're going to see a lot of guys play until they're old men in the NFL. It's just too brutal of a sport, and you're always one hit away from kind of losing out on that. But with the other sports, absolutely, man. I mean, Tom Brady's created an entire nutritional market where he's talking about plant-based protein, eating things that other people might not necessarily be consuming, and it's working out for him. And I think as science and nutrition and all those things continue to improve, you also think about kind of the nutritional supplement market, if you will. That seems to be something that's been improved quite a bit, and the young people coming up will be able to work with it. So I would agree. Yes, I think we are going to see more people in different sports, a variety of sports. You mentioned golf and tennis there, and of course, don't be surprised if Phil is competitive again. The guy he was really there. As Robbie's saying there at the bottom, it was fun to watch the golf, because I think most people listening to us and you and I talking are like, look, we don't consume a whole lot of golf unless it's Augusta, is pretty much the way that I would look at it. So I think it was good. And I also want to mention this, Vasu, very good for the few who decided to get in on this bad boy. Phil Mickelson closed at 200-1 at Caesar Sportsbook by William Hill, and could be found upward of 300-1 at other books around the Las Vegas Valley. They took a bit of a beating, as did DraftKings, who took a $1,000 bet on Mickelson at 300-1. That was placed on Wednesday in New Jersey. So that guy just picked up a cool $300,000. Sunday morning, the FanDuel Sportsbooks at the Meadowlands, a better made a $12,500 bet on Mickelson at plus 300. He picked himself up $37,500. How about this one? You'll love this, Vasu. A better hit a $60 two-leg parlay that included LeBron James posting a double-double in the Lakers playoff game against the Suns and Mickelson winning the PGA Championship. $60, folks, turned into $41,138.
I wish it was me. Anyway, yeah, so that's the way it goes. Good job by everybody that picked on Mickelson. Don't forget the U.S. Open is on Father's Day weekend, so we're looking about 3 weeks away from now, and it'll be an interesting U.S. Open to see what the competition is going to be like. All right, one baseball score to update here early in the morning here on the West Coast. Tampa Bay Rays had a 5-0 lead after the first. It's 7-5 in the bottom of the 10th. It's not updating yet. The Rays got 2 runs in the top of the 10th. Tampa Bay has won 10 in a row. We'll get to all the baseball stuff in a little bit, but we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back and talk all NBA. Back in 30 seconds on the Make the Money and Run podcast with Vasu and Casey. Charlie on assignment today. Thanks to everybody on Facebook and YouTube. We'll see you in 30. Hey everybody, welcome back. Casey Freelove and Vasu Vaddiparty here for the Make the Money and Run podcast. All right, we talked Phil Mickelson. That obviously leads the storyline as we go to it. But let's get to the NBA. Here are the lines tonight, as you see on the bottom of the screen. Milwaukee has a 1-0 series lead over Miami. 4.5 is the line. 222.5. Denver, who lost to Portland on Saturday night. One of my big plays on Saturday was taking Portland on the road. 1.5 for Denver, and I've seen it as high as 2 now at 226.5. Casey, we had 3 underdogs on Saturday out of the 4, 3 underdogs on Sunday out of the 4 games. That one if I'm doing my math in my mind right, I think two of the three were outright winners, if I'm not mistaken. And Washington was the one that covered but did not win yesterday against Philadelphia. So NBA thoughts this weekend, boy, what a weekend it was for the NBA first round playoffs.
Yeah, and again, hockey. I was arguing with my buddy on Facebook last night because he's a hockey guy, and he said nobody cares about the NBA playoffs. Well, I'm like, I care about the NBA playoffs, and I really don't care about the NHL playoffs as much as other people do. I mean, I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing, but we each have the sports that we enjoy, and I think this is a good start. Adam Silver's got to be pretty pleased with the way things went. Look, you kick it off with an overtime thriller on Saturday. The Bucks edging the Heat 109-107 in a game that was a little lower scoring than a lot of people might have thought it would be, although I think one of the picks I gave was the under in that game. Anyway, 109-107 the final there. That's going to be a fun one tonight, so that was a good way. Then we go right into the surprise, talking about outright underdog wins. The Mavericks taking care of the Clippers in L.A. Something about the way the Clippers were playing just didn't really do it for me. I'm not sure if it was Doncic and Porzingis enforcing their will on them, but something just seemed a little bit off. Maybe, I don't know, Ty Lue even, when talking to the reporters, was kind of like, I'm not sure exactly what happened. Celtics make it interesting early against the Nets. Nets come in and get the cover. And I think that's a good one for the public, Vasu, because Vegas is just exacting their revenge game by game right now, literally looking to take money out of our pockets when the dogs go 3-1. But at least the Nets covered that 8 and got some people their money back before Portland, which is funny because you, me, and Becky were all big believers on the Blazers. And it sounds like we all made some money betting on that road team. And I want to keep it right there. Let's talk a little bit about that particular series with a game 2 tonight. I think you, I, and Chuck coming into this, we're talking a little bit about the absence of Jamal Murray. I know he hasn't been there for a while. That's going to hurt, though. The Portland Trailblazers playing red hot down the stretch, 10-5 on their way into the playoffs and looking like a team that's primed to make a run. And Denver just looking a little bit sluggish there. I think another thing that played into it, Vasu, and this is what was weird about the overall thing in the playoffs, some states are still on lockdown pretty much. I mean, there was almost nobody there in Mile High. And then you look at, for example, Brooklyn, where they had a bunch of people, or New York at the Garden, where they had a ton of people yesterday. But specifically on this Blazers-Nuggets series, I think that we all thought Denver was a team that had a chance to go very deep in the playoffs, but you just can't lose kind of scoring and leadership that Murray brings to the table. I don't know. What were your impressions there as far as the game flow? The Nuggets only putting up 109, allowing an uncharacteristic 123. That felt like Portland pretty much was in control most of the game, even though it was tight and stretches.
No doubt about it. And in fact, Denver's biggest lead was either 81-72 or 71-62. It was a 9-point lead. That was the biggest lead that Denver did have, but Portland was able to shoot themselves back into it. And the fourth quarter, they just took over. I think Denver's undermatched in terms of roster. Monty Morris is back, but they've got other key guys that are out. And Jamal Murray is 20 to 25 points a game, and there's no way that they can match up with that. Jokic does a lot. There's no doubt. Anybody that watches the Denver Nuggets sees how much Nikola Jokic does for that team. He does everything for that team. But you just can't. You have to have guys around you that are going to hit. And they didn't play very well. They didn't shoot the ball very well. I think I give Portland more credit than I do Denver not playing very well, because I think Portland made a concentrated effort, especially in the fourth quarter, to play defense on Denver. And I think I didn't see a lot of it. I saw the highlights, but it seemed to me that their best option was to double team Jokic, take the ball out of the hands, make the other guys beat you. And sure enough, some of the guys did, and they did have a lead. But Carmelo Anthony had a great game. How about being off for a year and then coming back? He had a great game on Friday as well, too, on Saturday as well, too. You got to have somebody to score with Lillard and McCollum. Carmelo Anthony is that guy. And how about Nurkic? He neutralized Jokic down low in the middle, and he scored well too. And they got one thing that Portland doesn't do very well that they did on Saturday night, and I will be very interested to see how they handle that, is they were getting offensive rebounds. They were beating Denver the ball on the offensive glass, and the fact that they did that tells me that gives them second shots. And you're not going to miss, if you're Lillard, if you're McCollum, if you're Anthony, if you're Nurkic, you're not going to miss 4 shots in a row or 3 shots in a row, especially if you get an offensive rebound. It usually leads through a makeable 3, and that's what happened for Portland on Saturday night. So I'll be interested to see that. And Milwaukee, same thing with Milwaukee. Milwaukee didn't play very well either. I just can't see Miami keeping up in the series. Milwaukee had a lead in that game. They came back from being down, but they did not shoot the ball very well at all. In fact, Giannis is still having trouble making free throws. Middleton missed 3 free throws. He's nearly 90%. Drew Holiday is nearly 85%. He missed free throws. I mean, to me, that was an easy cover for the Milwaukee Bucks. And the fact that it got to overtime, give Miami Heat the credit because they're undermanned. Tyler Hero didn't shoot the ball as well. Dragic played great. Adebayo was really good. Jimmy Butler, all he does is get buckets. He sent that game into overtime. Jimmy Buckets did, and before you know it, it's into overtime when the Bucks had a chance to really take a big lead. Casey,
it's a really good matchup. I mean, obviously these teams know each other well. Miami pulling the minor upset, even though it doesn't seem like an upset in retrospect since they made it all the way to the NBA Finals. As far as today, they've done it again. I mean, they've set this point spread right there where it's going to make you pause and think a little bit. In fact, it's identical point spread. Milwaukee minus 4.5. Total at 223.5. Now that's been jiggling around a little bit. That did open at 222.5, and I see it as high as 224 at a couple of strip properties. Now, interestingly, Vasu, I'm on the public consensus. 94% of the money right now is on the Heat getting 4.5. And anytime you see 90% of the money, talking to you Golden State Warriors fans, you better be damn careful because Vegas doesn't like to pay out 90% plus winners. That's not the way that they keep those sports books golden. So tonight, I wouldn't be surprised if the Heat keep it close again, but I would have to say, yes, Milwaukee, the motivational factor, they looked a little bit more aggressive. And, of course, you've got to take advantage because now home court matters. I know we touched on this before the playoffs started, and I mentioned it a little earlier. But isn't it a trip, man, seeing, and hearing you can hear noise and booing and cheering. It's got to be something the players are really thriving on as far as, stepping up your game at home. I think it's going to be something that does come into play before this whole thing's over with.
Absolutely, Casey. The fact is that let's talk about the fans being in the stands certainly make a difference. I don't think it affected Portland very much. Oregon, I think, has had fans come back into their arena, so it'll be interesting to see how the Nuggets react to when they go back to Portland as well, too. And I know Milwaukee had fans in there, limited capacity of fans in there as well, too. And then Boston and Brooklyn, they're full swing in New York with Brooklyn right now. So they came back. They were down by 6-7 points. They take a 1-0 series lead against the Celtics. I just don't have a good feeling. I don't know about you, Casey, but I just don't have a good feeling about the Celtics. I just think they're just off a little bit. I don't know if the COVID issues got to him during the year. Jason Tatum has been great, but in spurts he looks tired, and I think the whole team looks kind of disjointed. Not that much disjointed, but a little bit enough to go up against a team like Brooklyn to be able to stay into it. And they did cover the 8, but they were down by 7-8 points at one point in the second quarter. Third quarter, the offense gets going for Brooklyn. Kevin Durant scores his buckets just like getting out of bed. Like I said the other day, gets out of bed and can score 25 without a problem. And then in the fourth quarter, they played a little bit of defense on Boston as well too. So I'll be interested in seeing that. But let's go back to Friday here real quick. You mentioned Memphis. Utah didn't have Donovan Mitchell last night, and Utah lost outright to the Grizzlies, an 8.5-point underdog. They did have Mike Conley back. But Donovan Mitchell, obviously, just like Jamal Murray, if you don't have that guy on the floor, it's going to be tough to win. And I can't believe that line stayed as high as it did with Donovan Mitchell not being in the game, Casey. And you saw what Memphis did on Friday night, especially after getting beat by the Warriors on Sunday. They came in and took Golden State apart methodically and forced it into overtime and was able to take over in the overtime. And our favorite guy, Grayson Allen, ended up hitting big threes on Friday night. And last night, they all played well. I didn't see the box score, but I got a feeling that Memphis played really well. They outscored Utah by 13 in the second quarter after being down by 6. So they were able to come back and they were able to maintain that and hold on to that lead and get the victory. And that's a big game 1 victory for the Memphis Grizzlies, coming off the play-in victory over the Warriors in Utah, getting ready for game 2 tomorrow night, Casey.
Well, it reminds me of when we first saw the wild card in baseball. Remember, like the 2003 then Florida Marlins winning a championship, and then a lot of teams were able to reel off titles from the wild card spot. Somebody's got to play some pretty good basketball to even get into a position to play in the play-in game. Beating the Warriors certainly gives Memphis a little bit of confidence. And let's be honest, Vasu, this is not a team that's on television that often. I'm not going to pretend that I've watched a whole lot of Grizzly basketball, but I was pretty impressed with not only the way the team played, but the way they made Utah uncomfortable. I mean, getting Rudy Gobert to foul out of the game, that's huge. Can't say enough about that. And also the resiliency of the Grizzlies to just keep coming back, even though they got down early. They certainly looked like a team that was in a better position head-wise. Now, the Jazz didn't play terrible. I mean, Bogdanovich played pretty well. And, basically Brooks outplayed him on the other side. Mike Conley, of course, knows the Grizzlies well, having been there for so long. And Rudy Gobert didn't have a terrible game before he fouled out. He had 11 points and 15 boards, so that certainly helps. This might be just kind of the wake-up game you need. Do I think the Memphis Grizzlies are going to win the series against the Utah Jazz? No. But I could see them picking up another win. And it's always nice when you're the road team and you're the biggest dog on the board to pick up a victory and get yourself a little bit of confidence, knowing that now you have wrestled back home court. Even if you lose the second game, you can feel pretty good about yourselves. And the other thing I like is the exposure they get. The NBA needs to trot these teams out there. I guarantee you, anybody who stayed up late on the East Coast last night has not watched a lot of Jazz or Grizzlies basketball. So it can only be good for the product to get them out there and have a pretty fun and competitive game that ends up in a 3-point win.
No doubt. And the note came across that Donovan Mitchell will be back for game 2, so that'll certainly help the case for Utah. All right, the last one to talk in the NBA, the Atlanta Hawks and the New York Knicks. New York Knicks have the home court advantage in the series. They were down big, and then at the end, the Knicks ended up having the lead. But then in a tie game, Trae Young goes down 9.8 seconds on the clock when he starts dribbling. And even his own teammate, Lou Williams, says, "Don't pass the ball, take the shot." That was a quote in the paper today, in the newspaper, for those that don't remember what a newspaper is. But 9.8 on the clock, Trae Young takes the shot, makes the shot. I saw it. It was a little finger roll, and they end up winning by 2, and the Knicks are down 0-1 in the series. Kind of disappointed for Knicks fans. But what about Atlanta? I don't think a lot of people gave Atlanta a shot because they don't play defense. They score a lot, and if they go cold shooting-wise, and that includes Trae Young, then it's a problem for the Hawks because their defense is not very good. And I thought New York's defense, for the parts that I did see, were not very good in terms of stopping penetration by the Hawks and then dishing and kicking out for threes. And they made a lot of shots last night. I don't know what their field goal percentage was. It was a low-scoring game. It stayed under. Did it stay under? I don't remember if it stayed under. But the fact is that Atlanta did get the victory on the road, a big victory on the road over New York, and they'll get ready for game 2. Thoughts on Atlanta and New York, Casey?
Yeah, that was probably the game of the weekend. I mean, 15,000 Knickerbocker fans in the arena, which is a huge increase, is kind of what I'm talking about. Seeing Spike Lee back out there, that's kind of fun. Gives you memories of Knicks teams past. But here's the thing, gamblers. Again, Vegas wants your money, and they know that a lot of you are going to bet on the Knicks because they're a feel-good story. I call them Team Kentucky because they've got so many John Calipari-led guys that are on that team. And some of the guys did play well. I mean, they had a pretty good game overall. That's why it was a 2-point loss. It's not like they were ever out of it. Alec Burks, certainly impressing. Derrick Rose, again, we talk about the father time stuff. Derrick Rose getting up there, man. I mean, he's been in the league now for, I think, 13 years. And the problem was Julius Randle, a guy that has really been kind of the leading figure on that team. He only went 6 for 23, so that hurt him a little bit. We talked about one Bogdanovich in Utah. We got to talk about the other Bogdanovich, who had 18 points for Atlanta. And again, these are two teams that neither had been in the postseason for quite some time. So there was a lot of nerves, I would think, involved. But Trae Young is ice cold, and he's cocky, and I mean that in a complimentary way, Vasu. I mean, I'm sure you heard him talking to the reporters after the game. The young man does not doubt his ability to pick up victories. And that's exactly what they did. I think this is a fun game. It's a game kind of the league wanted. And when the Knicks really started turning it on in the second quarter, getting it close, and the fans were on their feet, it finally felt like playoff basketball for the first time in a long time. And I'll go back to what I said on Friday. I'm really bummed these two teams have to play each other because had they been playing other teams, I would likely be rooting for both because we want some fresh blood, my friend.
No doubt about it. So Atlanta takes a 1-game-to-none series lead. In the East, Milwaukee has a 1-game-to-none series lead. Brooklyn has a 1-game-to-none series lead. And the last game that we're going to talk about, the Philadelphia 76ers and those ever-dangerous Washington Wizards. Did they put a scare into Philadelphia yesterday. An 8-point underdog. They did cover. Lose by 7 did Washington. Philadelphia has a 1-game-to-none series lead. Just talk about that game from what you saw, Casey. I didn't see a lot of it, but I did see the box score, and it looked like Washington shot the ball well. It looked like when they got down early in the game, they were able to make runs and get back. In fact, they had a lead at half, 62-61, and then the Philadelphia defense, who I still think is the best defense in the Eastern Conference, shut down the Wizards in the fourth quarter and were able to stretch a 3-point lead into a 9-point lead, and then eventually an 11-point lead before Washington came back and made it a 7-point game and a cover for the Washington Wizards and the 8th seed. But what do you look for game 2 and the rest of the series for Washington, Casey?
Well, I hope we have 2 series to talk about because I'm not letting you go without blasting your Lakers a little bit. But we will talk about this one first. Yes.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about them.
Tobias Harris, huge night, 37 points. Joel Embiid with 30. And I do love Tobias. I've actually, in my radio job, I've had his dad on a couple of times. He is an entrepreneur and seriously Father of the Year candidate every single year. So that family is nothing but impressive to me. And maybe we've got, along with Ben Simmons and Embiid, Harris could step in and we could have another big three, because the Sixers are the team that's gotten the least respect. We've talked about it and documented this throughout the year, as high as 5-1 odds, despite the fact that they have led the Eastern Conference for the entire year, basically in first place, at least the second half after the All-Star game. But I don't think the Wizards by any means are done in this series, and I think that they're another team that's going to draw on the confidence that they got from playing hot down the stretch. We talked about them being 17-6 since they acquired Russell Westbrook, and they did go on a couple of runs in this game to make it a little bit closer. The other thing is, Vasu, let me get your thoughts on this. Doc Rivers is kind of like undercover. You forget that he's not with the Clippers and he's in Philadelphia coaching them up. This has been arguably his best coaching job, because to come to a new city, a new market with new players and try and espouse your philosophy on them and get them to buy in. 49-23 says it all. And more importantly, Vasu, 29-7 at home. So as long as you've got home court advantage, you should be feeling very confident, if you're a Sixers fan, that this team can go and go very deep. And I think, though, the Wizards might be that fly in the ointment for the gamblers, because I think that they're going to set these lines high right there, 7, 8, 9. And the Wizards, even if they don't win, are still going to find a way to lose by 6 or less.
There's no doubt in my mind. In Philadelphia, able to get the victory. They'll play game 2 tomorrow. I think Wednesday night they'll play game 2. Okay, in the West, Dallas is a 1-game-to-none series lead. We talked about Portland. Those are 2 road teams. And then the Memphis Grizzlies. So 3 road teams. The only road team that didn't win, Casey, the only favorite in the West that covered, the Phoenix Suns. They beat the Lakers 99-90. Really thought the Lakers were going to have a better game plan, and it seems like they did not. Give Phoenix a lot of credit. They did make the shots when they needed to, and DeAndre Ayton showed up. I did watch a lot of that game in the afternoon. It was going on side-by-side TV with the Dodgers-Giants game. But the Lakers, they didn't shoot very well, and they had a rough time. They had a rough time with the Phoenix defense and taking shots when they were missing it. And it's just a very interesting scenario that the Lakers have put themselves in, losing 99-90. They were a 2-point. It went down to 2. A lot of people still think the Lakers are going to win the series, but the fact is that Phoenix is no slouch, and the number 2 team in the NBA West has showed why they're the number 2 team in the West, even with Chris Paul and his bad shoulders. By the way, props to him. He is my MVP candidate, one of them, for playing through that shoulder, because that looked very painful, and he was doing everything one-handed. You could just tell any bumping or any grinding that he got on that shoulder was totally painful. But how about Ayton showing up? Devin Booker showed up. They all showed up, and they had a big lead, but the Lakers were able to come back a little bit. They get a couple threes, and they made it close. They got it to 6. Really thought the Lakers had a chance to come back. If they had gotten it to 6 with about 3 minutes to go, then we might have seen LeBron or Anthony Davis take over down the stretch. But it wasn't meant to be. The Phoenix Suns have game 1, 99-90 over the Lakers, and they take a 1-game-to-none series lead. The only favorite of Sunday to cover amongst the 4 games, Casey.
You're not going to see Anthony Davis with the worst plus-minus on the court again the rest of the playoffs. I'll tell you that much. -18 for AD. Other stats that you want to look at if you're a Lakers fan as to what went wrong: 3-point percentage, 26.9%. They went 7-26, so that's certainly interesting. And then free throw wise, 17 of 28, and some big free throw misses in the second half when they had a chance to really get this thing close at this point. Oh, and thank you, Christina. You're welcome for our tips. We watch so you can win, and I won a little bit of coinage on that app this weekend as well. But Vasu, there's a lot of things that the Lakers could look at in this game, and the other part is we almost had a Donnybrook, good old-fashioned fist fight on the court with Alex Caruso and Cameron Payne kind of mixing it up a little bit. And then Montrezl Harrell jumps into the fray. It was crazy how quick security and everybody started pushing the players back towards the benches, because they know they don't want to be without players. You got to have all your guns if you're going to get it going. Bottom line, though, is it's very hard for me to see a scenario where LeBron James and the defending world champions go out in the first round. I totally think Phoenix is competent and capable. You mentioned DeAndre Ayton. He was playing out of his mind. Great pick, by the way. Well done, Suns, with the #1 pick when you got that bad boy. And Chris Paul showing that leadership. Right shoulder contusion. goes back there. They give him the Miyagi, the magic. He comes back out and he plays like a maniac. And of course, Devin Booker is just flying all over the court. And I certainly enjoy watching that. Their other pieces are great. They're buying into their coach's philosophy, and it's worked out well. But I'm not quite ready to give the Lakers the old dirt nap. I think they're going to be okay. I think they're going to come back with a vengeance. In fact, let me pull up the NBA odds here since we're talking a little bit about these upcoming games. Lakers 2-point favorites. And how about this, my friend? And talk about this, lowest total on the board by a mile. They set that over under at 208 for their next contest.
Well, because 212.5 didn't even get close, 99-90. I had that game picked on the under at 212.5. I wasn't sure which side to go, so that came out to be a winner for me. It was a pretty good weekend NBA wise. I did like Dallas. I did like Portland, Boston, or Brooklyn was New Jersey, Brooklyn weekend. It was for me. Never mind. What city are they in, Casey? Brooklyn, right? Okay, Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Brooklyn played well. And then Washington did cover. We did talk about that. And then Atlanta, I think we were all on the Knicks. I think the Knicks kind of surprised us all. I wasn't sure Atlanta was going to be good enough. And then the other Western game yesterday was Memphis and Utah, and Memphis beating them late night last night. Okay, so,
let's look at some of these point spreads before we move past the NBA. You've obviously got tonight's up on the board, 4.5 for Milwaukee, total 222.5. Denver -1.5 against Portland, 226.5 the total there. If we look ahead to tomorrow, Boston and Brooklyn, you've got the Nets up there at -9.5. That's a good number. That's one that's probably going to get action on both sides. 227 the total there. I just mentioned the Lakers and the Suns. Another one to look at that we touched on earlier, the Clippers and the Mavericks. I mean, if you watch that game, this seems a little high. Dallas is getting 6 points. The Clippers are 6-point favorites in that game, and the total's at 216. And we've been talking about it ever since the late season, folks. These totals are going to be lower, and they're going to play lower than they have in the regular season. The highest total on the board, obviously, is Washington and Philadelphia because of the potential for just insane scoring. 230.5 the total there, and the Sixers 8-point favorites. We move on to the last two. Atlanta getting 2.5 in New York, 214 the total there. And then Utah opened as a 7.5-point favorite. That's now been bet up to 8.5 with the total at 217.5. I don't know if any of those numbers jump out at you. To me, it seems like the Clippers, that might be a little much, 6 points, even though they probably should bounce back and get a victory. They just looked all kinds of out of sorts. And I think that as long as Porzingis is doing exactly what he did yesterday, you know what Luka's going to do for you. This series has certainly gotten way more interesting than it was probably heading in. I thought that the Clippers were the easy chalk pick in that one, and I didn't look right in game one, that's for darn sure.
Well, it's going to be interesting. Let me ask you this before we close out the NBA. The mentality of sportsbooks and lines makers in terms of series like this, they start the lines out, kind of a feel-out process, kind of like the players do in a best-of-5 series. I don't remember, or I can't, pending an injury, of course, pending a major injury, of course, I don't remember a Game 2 at the same venue ever being lower, but I've seen it go higher a little bit. You think that because, let's take Dallas and the Clippers, for example. Obviously, Memphis won. Donovan Mitchell wasn't there. That's a different story. But let's take the Clippers, for example. They're a 6-point favorite. I think it was 216.5 or 217, whatever it was on Saturday. They're at 6 right now. But I could have seen it gone up higher because a lot of people are going to think that the Clippers are not going to win or not going to lose 2 games in a row at home. And I think the lines makers are smart enough to know that. So for me, it's not a surprise to see any of these lines either the same or higher. You mentioned New York. New York's a 2.5-point favorite now when they were a 1-point favorite at closing line yesterday, and it goes up to 2.5 because it's very hard to win 2 games on the road as a playoff team. So you think that goes in the mindset? I mean, we all know it's tough to figure out the formula. Be some mindset that we know as a pattern for lines makers, Casey.
It is tough. It's tough for both the book and for us. And I know that this applies more to baseball, but one of your core philosophies when it comes to the gambling is you're not always buying into the trend, you know, like, okay, well, this team's lost 3 in a row, so they've got to pick up a victory. And we see it all the time in baseball where people hammer a team that's on a losing streak or jump on a team that's on a winning streak, and they end up being mistaken in that. And I think Las Vegas will continue to adjust. I would also say, folks, look for these totals to continue getting low enough to the point where today my only NBA play is actually an over. And I literally look back at my book. I haven't played an over seriously since probably late April. I've been going all unders late in the season. It's worked out really well. But I think I found one today that I do like the over in. And one last time, this is the playoffs. Your biggest bets should have already been placed in the NBA. Right now is not the time to try and, max out your bankroll, because these guys have time. They've got less games they have to deal with, and they've got Harvard level statisticians who pretty much already know, based on the law of averages, how these things are going to play out. I think it's going to be a grind the rest of the way. I'm not saying don't get in and play, but maybe you want to look back to one of our old friends, the old teaser. Get yourself a few extra points, especially if the lines are good. That's the way you can kind of creep in there, Vasu, and pick up a little profit.
I'll be interested to see. By the way, on Friday night, one of my picks was the under on the Memphis Golden State game. Had that game not gone into overtime, that would have been a big winner for me, because I did not see the Warriors coming back in that game, down 9 with about 3.5 minutes to go, and they came back and tied it up. We'll see what happens with the Warriors as they are eliminated down the stretch. But the Memphis Grizzlies, they're no fluke. They beat the Jazz in game 1. Yes, no Donovan Mitchell, but we'll see. But it's going to be an interesting game 2s coming up, and we'll talk about it on Thursday. We'll review all the game 2s and possibly game 3s on Thursday when Charlie and I are here. Okay, Vasu, Vaddiparty, and Casey Freelove. We're going to take 30 seconds right now. You can catch us Monday, Thursdays, and Fridays right here at 4:15 on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Download and subscribe anywhere you get your podcast if you miss it. Don't forget our picks at the end of each show is where we all the after trying to figure out where we're going to go from there, I guess. So we'll take 30 right now. Casey Freelove, Vasu, Vaddiparty. We'll talk baseball. Big weekend in San Francisco if you're a Los Angeles Dodgers fan, and not so good if you're a San Francisco Giants fan. And also the Yankees, White Sox in New York. A big weekend for the Yankees as well, too. Back in 30 with all the baseball talk. Welcome back to the Make the Money and Run podcast for Monday, May 24th. Casey taking a break here, getting some water, coming right back up. Let me give you an update before we get to the rest of the baseball and review the weekend and preview the games tonight. If you saw my earlier post today, the Tampa Bay Rays are red hot. They've won 10 in a row. They're about to sweep the Toronto Blue Jays in Toronto. The updated score came up finally. Marcus Semien tied the game in the bottom of the 10th at 7. Rays were able to get out of it. And what do the Rays do in the 11th? When you're a hot team, Casey, all you do is put a touchdown up on Toronto in the 11th inning. You're up 14-7 now and looking pretty good to go after win number 11 in a row over Toronto. Toronto slipped. That'll be 6 losses in a row. This will be the last game in Dunedin for them. They go to New York to play the Yankees, and then they will go to Buffalo starting next week to open up their Buffalo season. So a very interesting season for the Toronto Blue Jays. But Tampa Bay, boy, they didn't start out very well, and here they are, Casey, real quick on the Tampa Bay Rays. 11. I'm assuming they're going to hold on to a 14-7 lead in the bottom of the 11th, but you never know in these days with relief pitching. There's not a sure thing out there, as we know in the wagering world, Casey Freelove.
Yeah, they've gone hog wild here now, matching the Red Sox with a 29-19 record. They're about to pass the Red Sox, actually, and I think they would have the best win percentage in the AL. That is correct. So, well done there. They really improved their run differential as well. I remember back when they were a lot closer to 0. Now they're at plus 44. So that is good news there. And the ability to put up 7 runs is pretty damn impressive in itself, I would say, Vasu. So, yeah, a team that's hot and a team that's streaking towards the top. And I think we know how this team does it. I mean, they're just like Oakland A's East. They find a way to get players. They use them up right, and they find a way to continue to win, even when they lose some of their stars, which they did. They lost a couple of big-time pitchers this offseason, yet they still find a way to get out there and pick up victories. As far as how long is this going to last? Well, it's probably going to last the rest of the week because they've got the Royals for 3 games on tap before they take 2 against Philadelphia. Then it'll get real interesting over Memorial Day weekend as they kick off on Memorial Day at the Yankees for a 4-game set. Now, as far as the Yankees, it seems like they're playing a little bit better as we look at the American League East. Boston, I wouldn't say is, quote, fallen off because they still have a great win percentage, but I think they're the one that we didn't think was probably going to be there. And then, unfortunately, you know, the genetic team, if you will, Toronto, the team that has all our favorite players' kids on it, basically, from when we were young, they've fallen off quite a bit at 23 and 22. So the AL started picking up a little bit. I think in the preseason, you and I probably would have thought that the Yankees would be the clear-cut favorites. The Rays would still be competitive, but I don't think any of us had Boston doing as well as they did. Although we joked on and off the air, you and I and Chuck, that you either have to take the Red Sox division or to finish in the basement, because that seems to be their trend lately as a franchise.
There's no doubt about it. Boston hits the ball. For those that are wagering on the Red Sox, Eduardo Rodriguez has lost 3 in a row, so keep that in mind when he goes to the mound. His next start, he did lose yesterday to Tampa Bay. We said it's going to probably end up being in a 11 game winning streak. They're right there. They do it. Randy Arozarena has become a star for that team. Joey Wendell, former A's prospect, hit a grand slam in the first inning. They had a 5-0 lead, let that go. Had a 7-5 lead, and then it came back to 7-7, and now it's 14-7. Bottom of the 11th. All right, let's look back on the weekends. We have the National League lines at the bottom. We'll talk about the games today and the series coming up. But let's start in San Francisco. Obviously, a big weekend for the Dodgers and the Dodgers fans. I was there Friday and Saturday, a little bit on Sunday, but what a weekend it was for me as a fan of the team. They just came out and put a whooping on the San Francisco Giants. Now it's only May 24th, and I say that. And Giants fans, please, as you get on me all weekend, as I've seen on my post, I'm still rooting for the team, and I think they're a good team. Just had a bad weekend to a team that right now is better. And DeSclafani disappointed a little bit. 10 runs in the third inning yesterday is what they got. The Dodgers with Walker Buehler on Saturday were able to shut down the bullpen, gave up a couple of runs. And on Friday, what a great matchup that was with Trevor Bauer and Alex Wood. Alex Wood a couple of pitches away from actually winning that game, which is why I didn't bet on that game on Friday night. I did take yesterday with Urias. By the way, Urias 2 for 2 with 3 RBIs, a double and an RBI single in that 7-run inning that got them to 10-0. So, Casey, we live in the Bay Area. We know the Giants fans very well. We know the Dodger fans very well because they're all over the place as well too. Thoughts on the series? Do you think it's a church and separation? You think they're separated by that much, or just happened to be a weekend, just a bad weekend for the Giants?
A little of both. Although it is surprising for a team that is 14-7 at home to have just taken 3 straight losses. You wouldn't expect that heading in. I think the thing you got to love if you're a Dodgers fan is the fact that they haven't played once really with the intended starting 9 guys that they were supposed to have out there. You had Mookie Betts not play yesterday with a little bit of a shoulder issue, yet you still put 11 runs up on the board. It kind of speaks to the depth and the way they built this team. You know, you haven't had Bellinger for quite some time. Seager's been out of the lineup. So I kind of feel like this team's best baseball is ahead. And if you can still put up crooked numbers against a team that was in first place heading into the series, you've got to feel real good about yourself. One thing I wonder about is Kenley Jansen. And do you think that this team is going to, because they've had injuries in their bullpen as well, are they going to have to go out and spend even more money than they've already spent building this juggernaut to keep it going? Because I believe in their starting pitching, of course. Obviously, they've got brand name guys up and down their lineup. But I feel like either because of injuries or because of inconsistencies and the constant worry we always have about Kenley Jansen, even last year in the playoffs we were talking about this. I wonder if a move is going to be on the future books here for them.
Well, every team's out on the move for something. Whether if you're a team down in the dumps, you're looking for moves to dump salary and get prospects back. If your team up in the air, then you're looking to improve your team any way you can. Right now, the bullpen's the only issue. They didn't want to go to a couple of guys. They didn't have to go to a couple of guys yesterday. They didn't want to overuse David Price. He did start one of the games last week against Arizona as an opener. Kenley Jansen, you got to take him or leave him right now. Dave Roberts loves him, and he looked good over the weekend against San Francisco. He did get 2 saves, and he was able to pick up the win. But our guy Trevor Bauer on Friday night, boy, how about that? The sword, the let me hear your wrestling move, all this other stuff. I mean, the first time he's from Southern California, first time pitching against the Giants in San Francisco, I would say he took it all in, 126 pitches, and he said he could go on 140, 150. Honestly, I believe him the way he's throwing right now, but Trevor Bauer definitely off to a good start. All right, let's move on to another series in the National League. The Cubs and Cardinals used to be a pretty good rivalry, still is. St. Louis got off to a slow start. They're still in first place in the National League Central, but here come the Cubs. All of a sudden, they've won 2 out of 3 in St. Louis, a place that they never ever get too many victories on. And it's kind of funny how yesterday's game ended 2-0. It was 0-0 going to the 10th on Sunday Night Baseball, and they end up getting a 2-1 victory. Craig Kimbrell gets the save. What are we making of the potential of losing 3 main guys in the Cubs after this season with Rizzo, Baez, and Bryant? And here they are going into St. Louis to beat a very good St. Louis team. I'm not sure St. Louis hits very well, Casey.
Well, it's great timing because even if you're the Cubs, it's a win-win for you. Obviously, you'll probably pay at least one of those guys, but all three of those guys are going to play their butts off because they're trying to get as much money as they can next season, and God bless them for it. I hope they do. The Cubs are a team we've not talked about that much on this program because they haven't been much to talk about, but they are playing better. 24-22 overall. You don't love the road record at 8-13, but there's still time to improve on it. You mentioned Baez, who's done a good one. He kind of cranked that one from Alex Reyes out of there, and Craig Kimbrell is doing a great job. It's so funny. I don't look at the Cubs that often, and now that I'm looking at news and notes and the guys that they've got on their team, I'm thinking, well, I kind of like them a little bit better.
All of a sudden, huh? Yeah, I know what you mean.
But the Cardinals, look, they're still solid, 26-20, 15-10 at home. I think they're doing exactly what a lot of people thought that they would do because of their offseason additions, including Nolan Arenado, who's been great. And the thing that's really great overall is just the fact that this division is going to be a lot of fun. I still think the Milwaukee Brewers have a lot of great baseball ahead of them. We know the Reds are going to put up crooked numbers sometimes, especially when they're playing in that bandbox that they call a home stadium. But maybe when the whole thing shakes out, it will end up being Cardinals and Cubs trying to get after it. Now, as far as I'm always obsessed with the run differential because different divisions tell different tales.
Yeah.
Cards are plus 11, Cubs are plus 16. The rest of the division is well under that 0 mark. Contrast that with the we were just talking about the NL West a little bit. You've got San Diego plus 75, LA plus 72, and San Francisco plus 47. So I think the bottom line here is that they've done a good job creating intrigue, getting us talking about these clubs, and the city of Chicago is in a good position because I think all three of those guys are going to continue to play pretty good baseball.
Let's look at the National League games today. Miami 122 over Philadelphia. Philadelphia salvaged one game against the Red Sox over the weekend. Zach Wheeler looking like the ace that he is finally for the Phillies. Pitched really well yesterday in a 6-2 victory. Taylor Rogers, I love this Trevor Rogers. Trevor Rogers for Miami. 6-2 with an ERA about 1.8. It's got Zach Eflin tonight. Phillies have had struggles in Miami over the years. The total 7 for good reason. Miami doesn't score. Philadelphia goes in slumps every once in a while. This left-hander, if you haven't seen Trevor Rogers pitch, he's one to watch. He's a good left-hander. He's got a lot of Bumgarner in him from speed and movement and location. It's really good. And then you got the Mets. 139. A little surprised at this in New York. I know Colorado doesn't hit away. Austin Gomber, the pitcher, the former Cardinals pitcher that was in the Arenado trade. 6.5 the total for David Peterson and Austin Gomber. Mets and the Cardinals. They're going to get DeGrom tomorrow. Or this week. They're going to get DeGrom back later this week. So hopefully the Mets will figure out how to score some runs before they get to him. And then the last one, we talked about the Milwaukee Brewers. The Brewers don't hit. For some reason, the last 2 weeks, they haven't hit at all. They've gotten a few victories. They got 2 out of 3 in Cincinnati last week. But they're going up against a hot Padres team right now. And Blake Snell, you don't know which Blake Snell you're going to get. There's always going to be one inning where he gives up a lot of base runners. Brandon Woodruff has had a good start to the year. But Milwaukee is slight favorite at 115 with the total at 7. Casey, what looks good in the National League here for you?
Well, the way that you set that up is the way that the public's already looking at it because this total right now for that Padres and Brewers game, it's at 7. You might be a little surprised that Woodruff's the favorite, but as you mentioned, the way that Blake Snell always has one of those rough innings and the fact that the Brewers are at home where they've actually not played that great, to be honest with you, 10-12. They really got to improve on that, but the public right now, basically 51% on Milwaukee, 49% on the Padres. 94% of the cash, is on that under 7. So anytime I get to the 90s range, it really makes me want to go look the other way because they don't pay those out very often. Colorado and the Mets, total at 6.5, very low. In fact, the public thinks the under is the play, 55% of the cash there on the under. And then Colorado with 55% of the actual money at plus 127. The thing about the Rockies is they're just not very good. I mean, I've watched them play. I've seen them lose in a whole bunch of different creative ways, including getting shut out. And the Mets are a team that we think should be one of the contenders there in the National League East. So I think that'll be an entertaining game. One of the more entertaining games of the day is wrapping up, and you've been referencing the score. In fact, it's over now. The Rays with that 14-8 win over the Blue Jays. That's one that is one to keep an eye on. And all in all, it's, another week's here. We're ready to rock. You've got the A's back home in Oakland welcoming in the Mariners. That should be a fun one. It's kind of a lighter slate today as far as the travel. And let me ask you this. Do you like the way that the schedule's setting up as far as it seems like Monday is a big travel day. Thursdays are a big travel day, which has kind of been the tradition over years, but we're also seeing other things. I guess my question to you is, Do you feel like they're doing their best to make sure that we're getting the best product available as far as rest days and time off in between series?
I'm a little slow here. Sorry on the uptake. Yeah, I got you, Casey. Mondays and Thursdays are generally traditional travel days because you finish the series on Sunday night. The worst thing you can do is if you're the Cubs or the Cardinals to have to play on a Monday after you play a Sunday night game
Yeah.
in the Midwest and all of a sudden have to travel to the West. It's been done before, but I think they are taking account into it. It's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But I'm interested in see what the National League West proves out this week. We've got some good series coming up. Charlie and I will review it on Thursday. Let's move on to the American League right now. The Detroit Tigers. This might be, other than a Matthew Boyd game, this might be the first time they've been favored in a game against the Cleveland Indians, who just lost 2 out of 3 to Minnesota. Spencer Turnbull, who had one at the last no hitter, I should say, because there's probably going to be a few more before the end of the year is over. Spencer Turnbull 125-9 over Henkes for the Indians. Minnesota and Baltimore pick him. Matt Shoemaker, the former Angel, and John Means, who's been the best thing for Baltimore this year. And then Oakland, 155, 7.5. Frankie Montas, I don't know what to make of him. Kikuchi's a good pitcher, Casey, but you got to think that Montas has got to get it going here as far as the A's go if they want to keep up with the Red Sox and the Rays now, as well as the White Sox.
Yeah, I'm looking forward, by the way, to seeing Turnbull. I mean, what a great, roll tide. Well done, sir. He got picked himself up a no-no, and it worked out well for his team. So I think it is kind of baffling almost that the Tigers are a favorite. You won't see that very often this year. Let's see what the public is thinking on that. I'll have to pull that up here and see where the money is going. Looks like we've got 67% of the public betting on Mr. Turnbull to have another fun appearance. Although, how about this, Vasu? As far as the run line, with the Indians getting 1.5, 99% of the money is on them right now. So I guess they're expecting this one to be a bit tight, as they say. Look, the A's are playing great. I mean, you can't say any more about how well they played. I mean, I know they lost yesterday, kind of blew a 4-0 lead, but they're getting balance. I mean, they got Pinder back now. They've got Olsen playing well, hitting his 12th home run of the season yesterday. And the cool thing about it, if you are somebody who doesn't watch the A's that much, is they've got all these pitchers that really aren't brand name, but they're starting to try and carve out their names for him. Frankie Montas, he's 5-3, got a little bit high of an ERA of 4.7. But the A's really need to get home and get improving against their division. They're only 5-8 against the AL West. Now, why is that? Because they've had so many damn games against the Houston Astros. That's really the reason why. But you'd like to see them find a way to pick up some victories. Olsen, as I mentioned, with those 12 home runs. Seattle 6-7 against the rest of their division. Coming in, the A's 5-5 in their last 10. The Mariners 3-7. And this is the thing, Vasu, I'm sure you've watched them and seen this. Only a 183 team batting average for Seattle. So they don't really wow you. They're a team you want to see on your schedule right now.
Right now, and those are the games that you take under unless you have a hot hitting team. I think if I've got my math and my memory right, 3-7 against the Astros, and it's kind of hurt the A's from a divisional standpoint. The first 4 sweep, and then 2 out of 3 in Oakland last week, but they did win 2 out of 3 in Houston the first time that they played. All right, very interesting stuff going on in the American League. Let's talk about the Yankees and the White Sox. White Sox are going to play today. They are a 176 favorite against those St. Louis Cardinals. Lance Lynn, the former Cardinal, is going up against his former team, and Kim going to pitch for the St. Louis Cardinals. St. Louis just lost 2 out of 3 of the Cubs. The White Sox just got swept by the Yankees. 2 of the games were close. Yesterday's game was not so close. Where do you see the White Sox right now from the AL Central standpoint? I think they're the best team there because Cleveland hasn't impressed me. We'll see how Cleveland fares the rest of the month and going towards the All-Star break. And then St. Louis still in first place, even though they haven't played really well in the last 7 to 10 days, Casey.
Oh, absolutely. The White Sox 14-8 at home, so that's certainly an advantage. Cards 11-10 on the road, so that's pretty good too. Chicago's struggling a little bit, as you mentioned. In fact, both these teams struggling a little. Excuse me, in their last 10. Chicago 4-6, as is St. Louis, and the White Sox have been dealing with some injuries as well. But how about this? They've got a collective. The White Sox on-base percentage of .341. That's good for first in the majors, and that certainly give you a lot of opportunities to score. I love the way this team's set up. I wouldn't even be afraid to actually run down to the book and maybe.
Your sound's out, Casey.
Pick it up. Sorry about that. My phone rings sometimes, and
that's all right.
That's the way it goes.
This is the internet. This is what we deal with in doing our shows these days. But yeah, no, I'll be interested to see what the White Sox do. This is a big series for them, and if they can match up against a good team like the Cardinals at home, and Lance Lynn comes out and pitches like he does. One thing about Lance Lynn is he does not walk guys, and that's the one good thing about him. And pitchers that are walking people, you can see the difference, especially in like the Giants. They don't walk guys. They have good defense, and the White Sox do as well too. St. Louis. We'll get to that. All right, let me just give an NHL update real quick. We're not going to talk a lot about it, but the NHL, the Tampa Bay Lightning are looking to close out their series at Florida. This is Game 4. Game 5, and then Game 4. Pittsburgh 140. They're three games to 1 up. They could look to close out. Toronto 160 at Montreal. They're 2 games to 1 up in that series. Winnipeg, the big shock. They're 3-0 on Edmonton. Edmonton's favored by 150-160 at home, and they're still a favorite in Game 3 on the road at Winnipeg. So like I said on Friday, if you're looking at a good underdog, look at the Winnipeg Jets to maybe close out the series. Las Vegas 180 over Minnesota 5.5. The home goals, if you play the Grand Salami, minus 115 because of the road favorites, and the Grand Salami over under 28.5 for the 5 games that are scheduled today. Boston and Colorado, the first 2 teams to get into the next round of the NHL playoffs. And with that, we will get to the picks right now. The pick segment, still unsponsored, but we'll figure out what to do here. Go ahead, Casey, with your picks.
Yeah, and also if you are one of our West Coast listeners, check out casino.org. They've got an article about the possibility of sports wagering in California being on the ballot as soon as the governor recall election this November is possible. And that is certainly something that I did not think Vasu and I would talk about. I think we'll wait for Charlie and all 3 be together on Friday to discuss the ramifications of that, not only for California, but also for Nevada. So that's something big. I'm going with the over. Screw it. Seattle's not very good at pitching. The A's are a team that can put runs together. They might cover it themselves. A's Mariners over 7.5 is my play there. It's kind of a wonky Monday. You don't have a full slate to choose from. That's the only one that looked good to me. And then I've given you my reasoning earlier in the NBA segment, but I'm going with the Heat and Bucks over. Look, the bottom line is they both missed so many that first game. That first game should have soared over the total. That's why they moved this number down and put it at 223.5. I don't think it's going to fly over, and you're not going to see me play a whole lot of overs in the NBA playoffs. But I feel like tonight, if the Heat do what they do and the Bucks kind of run up and down the court and push the pace like they want to, that game will go over the 223.5. My 2 plays for the day.
All right, A's Mariners over 7.5. The NBA Heat Bucks over 223.5. Bucks lead that series 1 game to none. All right, my picks for the day. Miami Marlins. I talked about Trevor Rogers, sub-2 ERA at home. He's really good at home, minus 128 against a pretty good Phillies team. Not sure they're great, but they always have trouble with the Marlins in Miami. Talk about how hot the Padres are right now. They just tore apart Seattle all weekend. Plus 105 with Blake Snell. God, I hope it's a good Blake Snell tonight, because if it's the guy that walks 6 guys in an inning and only lasts 5 innings, the only benefit that he has with the San Diego Padres is they've got an unbelievable bullpen. And that's what's keeping them in the standings right now, because they're still not very good defensively. And I don't think they're right there where they need to be hitting-wise. So plus 105 on San Diego against a good pitcher in Brandon Woodruff at the Brewers. The Cleveland Indians against the Detroit Tigers. Look, I haven't seen the Tigers favored at home with anybody other than Matthew Boyd in a long time. So I want to see it. And I don't think Spencer Turnbull is going to be Johnny Vandermeer and throw back-to-back no-hitters. And Cleveland just lost 2 out of 3 to Minnesota over the weekend. Cleveland, I just lost half the audience when I said Johnny Vandermeer. Plus 150 on Cleveland against the Tigers. And then in the NBA tonight, I'm going to take Portland plus 2. And I am going to go with the over. I didn't put it on there, but I'm going with the over on the Bucks, over 223.5. And those are the 5 picks that I'm going with tonight. Any last words here, Casey, before I close it down?
Don't bet your whole bankroll on the NBA playoffs. You should be playing less than you do in the regular season. And also in baseball, when you've got a limited slate, don't get too crazy, but enjoy yourself.
No doubt about it. Check out the podcast. Check out our social media pages. You can email us at mtmarpodcast@gmail.com. You can go to our Twitter site, @mtmr podcast. We're all on social media, including a Facebook Make the Money and Run page as well too. Thanks to everybody on Facebook. Let me shout out everybody here: Robbie and Christine, and David Andrews, Taylor Phillips for liking. Appreciate it very much for all the support. If you missed any of the live broadcasts, you can download and subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts, especially for our pick segment. Charlie will be back with me on Thursday. All 3 of us will be back on Friday. That's the Make the Money and Run podcast for Monday, May 24th, 2021, and we just ran out of time, so I don't have to tell anybody about my birthday weekend, which is probably a good thing anyway. So thanks to everybody on Facebook for all the notes and the kind words over the weekend for our show and for me as well. I really appreciate it. Didn't realize I knew that many people, but that's how it goes. All right, Casey, I will see you Friday. Have a great week, and enjoy your week, and we'll talk soon. All right, for Casey Freelove, I'm Vasu Vaddiparty. Have a great afternoon, and good luck.